stop by here. I had a meeting this afternoon in Atlanta with some of the arts people there about some of the same issues. And on my way back to Washington tomorrow night. I don't know if you know anything about the National Campaign for Freedom of Expression. You know a little bit about it. This is our bullet.
Some people don't know.
For you to take. It's an organization it's an arts organization primarily. It was created out of the arts community and started in 1989, officially in 1990, to be a group to respond to all of the growing attacks that were happening in the arts. Toronto made the start in the beginning, and then the NEA challenges after that. We knew that New York still co-counsel on the NEA before lawsuit, before artists whose grants were overturned by the chairman of the NEA. And part of that was settled out of court, and part of it was before the appeals court in San Francisco right now, the Standards of Decency Part. We have an office in Washington and Seattle where I live. We do grassroots organizing like this, talking to people. We do legal defense work. We do a lot of media work, trying to get the media educated, get the right different spin on things than usually they do. Movement has been very slow to get organized around these issues because it's the kind of issue, as I'm sure I don't have to tell you now, that people just wish didn't exist, that it didn't have to be dealt with. It gets too messy. It touches on a lot of issues people aren't comfortable with. So it's the reason the National Campaign was formed, the institutional arts community that was based primarily in New York and Washington. The service trade groups like the American Symphony Orchestra or the Association of American Museums, or an even bigger coalition called the American Arts Alliance. They just didn't want to deal with Toronto and Maplethorpe in those days, and so they just kind of wished it would go away, kind of a denial approach. And the same thing has happened at all other levels. It's the kind of issue that people just wish they didn't have to deal with. I think if they just sort of ignore it, somebody else will deal with it, and they won't have to get their hands dirty and have to mess with anything so complicated. But we've been saying from the beginning, it's everybody's issue. It's going to touch everybody eventually in some way. They know how to, the other side knows how to use issues like the gay and lesbian issue to really drive a wedge in, or to use it as a hammer to beat people up, threaten. And because of the people's sensitivity and homophobia, it's a prime issue. And we don't deal specifically with gay and lesbian issues, but because it's been one of the prime territories, and because a quarter of our board is gay and lesbian, it's where we spend a lot of time, but it's not our specific issue, our own issue. And we've been bringing it to the table of these other organizations because I would go to meetings in Washington where nobody would ever say the G or the L word at a meeting in Washington, and as if that was really had nothing to do with why all these things were happening at the National Endowment for the Arts. And so finally I would sit, when I first started this job in '91, and listen to them and say, well, don't you think it has something to do with gay and lesbian issues? And everybody would like, oh my God, we don't have to talk about that here, do we? So that was it. But this instance, which happened while I was on vacation in France, and I came back after being away for 3 weeks, to my first vacation in a long time, and Steve had this pile of stuff to go over with me about what had been happening here. And by then, of course, as you all know, it had been all over the place. It was an interesting end of a summer, which my summer began at the NALA conference in Miami, where, I've been asking NALA to have a chance to talk to their membership for several years, and they just kind of were nervous about talking about these issues. So this summer they invited me, and at the end of the summer, we have all of you. So it was an amazing few months. That's a little bit about us. I can learn a little bit about you.
I can't tell you a whole lot. I introduced myself, I'm John Greaves. I lived in Cobb County for close to 11 years and been active some locally in gay and lesbian groups, social groups, and some political groups, and some mainstream politics, party politics. and actually made some efforts to get groups started in Cobb County before, groups of gays and lesbians interested in political issues or working to promote acceptance of the gay and lesbian community, and have had very little success. Cobb County is a conservative area, and by and large, the gay and lesbian community in Cobb County is very quiet, and for the most part, I would say invisible.
Probably partly by choice, right?
A lot by choice.
Well, it's comfortable, it's very easy to hide.
Some of the choices choosing to be here because it's an easy place to hide. Some of the choices that it's the suburbs, there's a perception of lower crime, more affordable housing, and maybe it's a place that people want to be for a lot of other reasons, and they feel the need to hide because they're in the suburbs. But
how did you happen to what brought you into this issue with your activism? And you were active, and so are you involved in the arts community?
I enjoy the arts. I go to performances and I go to galleries and love movies, but I don't have that's my connection with the arts. I haven't been involved with the arts organizations, and I'm certainly not an artist.
Did somebody like call you and say, hey, we need some help on this, or did you hear about it and feel like you wanted to do something?
Something I've done as a person in the community, I got involved. There's a thing called the Community Relations Council, and I'm on the gay and lesbian chapter of the ACLU. The Community Relations Council in Cobb County is a no authority, no budget council appointed and confirmed by the county commission that's supposed to foster community relations, and that's something I've always felt strongly about, getting people to work together for common good instead of trying to ease dissension and fears and whatever among people. And so I got involved with the Community Relations Council over a year ago. Started going as an observer, and a county commissioner who's no longer a county commissioner in Cobb County asked me to submit a resume. And they had an opening. I was appointed to the council. So we've dealt with issues there, racism, job discrimination issues. We've had locally, we've got a growing non-English speaking Hispanic community, problems with between the Hispanic community and the police departments, local police jurisdictions. A number of things like that we've talked about. But it's a council that no budget, no authority, and a lot of times not a lot of sense of direction. We sort of wait for an issue to come up, and they would talk about it and send a recommendation to somebody or send a letter of position off to someone. So when I read in the newspaper that Commissioner Weissong was expected to introduce a resolution condemning the gay lifestyle and was proposing restricting arts funding, I called and asked that it be placed on the agenda of the Community Relations Council, and I just knew a fight was coming, and I called and arranged for a meeting place, and placed ads in a couple of local gay publications. Made up a name, the Cobb Citizens Coalition, and said there'll be a meeting of the Cobb Citizens Coalition to fight. So that was
the start of the Cobb Citizens Coalition.
It was the start of the Citizens Coalition, and that's how, I guess I got involved because I just decided to be involved and decided that other people were going to be needed, that there was going to be a fight, we were going to need to get a lot of people to work together.
Great, we're going to start asking questions.
Yes.
ACLU.
Yes, I'm Teresa Nelson. I'm Executive Director of the ACLU of Georgia. And
that's in Atlanta, right?
our office is in Atlanta. We cover the entire state of Georgia.
So you live in Atlanta?
Yes, absolutely. Mainly because I'm not a commuter. My hours are long enough. I don't want to driving to and from the office to that list. The ACLU, of course, has a long history of standing up to defend artistic freedom. Certainly, we felt very strongly about this for two reasons. One, of course, the additional information that we had from John and from Larry Pellegrini, who's the president of our Gay and Lesbian Rights Chapter, was that this particular resolution was being introduced condemning gays and lesbians. And of course, we felt very strongly that that was very wrong. It was simply, it would be a state-sanctioned bigotry. I mean, there's very clearly, that is what that resolution says, that we are picking out a segment of our population and we are condemning them because we don't understand, we don't think we like their lifestyle. Gordon Wysong is a fairly frightening individual. When you look at his history, and one article pointed out that his mother was a John Birch Society activist and had fought the ERA. With regards to Wysong, I'm personally somewhat surprised by it because this is so much what he's doing a part of the religious right agenda, and as awful as the Catholic Church can be sometimes, Gordon Wysong is Catholic, so it's unusual that someone who would be Catholic would carry this type of legislation for the Christian right. As a Catholic, I find it particularly offensive.
Well, Greg Bozell, right, is a Catholic, and there's more and more of a segment of the Catholic community that, of course,
They're probably all those charismatics. that
Probably.
everybody figure out.
The charismatics that disappeared in the early 80s.
are long con.
That's right.
Right.
That's what they're doing for
Yes,
themselves.
you're right. And the leadership, the bishops' conference by and large, is extremely conservative.
And they
The vast
joined in.
majority of laity are not.
They joined in with the Christian Coalition in the New York School Board race.
Yes,
They
I
were
remember that
right
very
there.
well. Very frightening coalition. That's not going to happen in the South, by and large. Too many Catholics have suffered at the hands of the Christian right on a regular basis here in Georgia to want to form a strong alliance other than on specific issues, particularly, of course, on abortion. Cobb County has a very diverse citizenship, has a fairly educated citizenship. So it's somewhat surprising to me that it was Cobb County that did it first, so it is traditionally very conservative. It has one of the most conservative congressmen in the United States, Newt Gingrich, representing a large portion of Cobb County.
We barely won the last time.
Well, maybe next. There's always another election.
Right.
We really anticipated something like this to come from Clayton County. And we're not surprised, of course, because when we stay in touch with all the other affiliates, either directly or through our national office, we've been keeping a great deal of tabs on Oregon and on Colorado's Proposition 2. And of course, the ACLU there led the litigation to enjoin to that particular proposition. The other thing, too, is that we've been informed by National that, this is coming, it's going to be in your backyard. As so many of our own different organizations that we're all involved with have let us know about that. So we knew it was coming. It was just a matter of which form. We honestly anticipated this type of resolution in some form or another to hit in the legislature first, not at a county government level. When Wysong got caught and when he realized that if arts funding was restricted to those which only promoted family values, and by the way, there's nowhere in the resolution or in the arts funding ordinance that was passed, or budget amendment, whatever exactly it is, that ever defines what family values is. Now, I want to know.
They had no intention of doing so.
Like the word
Right.
decency is not defined.
Exactly. So it's vague, it's overly broad. There's no way you would ever know how you would fit into their definition of family values. So of course we're seeing litigation lighting up, and the legal challenge would have been fairly clear. Wysong was informed by the county council that if litigation were filed by the ACLU and other individuals and groups, that by and large Cobb County would lose. So therefore they decided that, well, as Wysong said on Nightline the night after the arts funding was cut, if we couldn't place value judgments on how we paid for the arts, then we wouldn't pay for the arts at all. But it is paying for the arts. It is paying for certain organizations basically through the back door. So that's where
Now, had he had any previous history of activity specifically around gay and lesbian issues, anti-gay and lesbian issues?
Not that any of us.
He's not been in office prior. He ran as, to fill an unexpired term, and he was elected with 106 votes or 109 votes from a district that's a quadrant of the county.
So those commissioners are elected by a specific geographic area?
Northeast, southeast.
And you've got to realize there's, in the 92 election, there's a lot of anti-incumbent feeling. And at the county level, that really shows up by what we have now. Most people are new there now from the last
We
election.
looked historically at the Cobb County Commission, and the turnover at the Cobb County Commission is incredible. It's one of the highest rates of turnover any county in this state. So,
We're going to look to maintain that tradition.
good.
I don't think that Cobb County is so surprising that it happened here. 3 weeks or so before it first came out in the news that he was considering doing this. This is before it was introduced in the commission meetings. There was a Christian Coalition leadership seminar held at the Roswell Street Baptist Church, which is the largest Southern Baptist church in Cobb County. Newt Gingrich was a speaker, and there were a couple other people, and I became aware of it because I saw Max Cleland was supposed to be a speaker, and Max Cleland's the Secretary of State here, and a wonderful man. And I called his office horrified. I met him before, and that didn't fit in, and I found out that he wasn't a speaker. They just put his name on the program, and he was trying to get them to, in local news, Marion Journal, to retract it. They printed a story saying he was going to be a speaker, and he wanted a retraction. But I didn't know what the connection with Wysong and those people were until recently. There was an article that came out in the Christian Index, which is this weekly newsletter of the Georgia Baptist Convention. Christian Index had an article in it in which Nelson Price, the minister at Roswell Street Baptist Church, said that he and Wysong had been friends for years, and that Wysong had brought this proposed resolution ordinance to him, and they worked together on it before he introduced it. So I think this leadership, when I heard that they were having these leaderships, I knew something was going to happen in Cobb County. I didn't maybe expect it would be this that would happen, and it would be this soon.
It did.
And then the head of the state chapter of the Christian Coalition lives in Cobb County.
What's his name?
Pat Gartland.
Is it
Pat Gartland.
Gartland.
I don't believe is it a man or a woman?
It's a man.
It is a man, okay.
Is he,
Yeah, it was in the newspaper one day last week.
I'm referring to him as it
is he affiliated with any national Christian right group that you're aware of?
No.
Well, he's a Christian. Did you say he's the local Christian?
He's the head of the state chapter of the Christian
Right,
Coalition.
so he's affiliated with the Christian Coalition, which is the overall umbrella of all the Christian
Right.
groups.
And
Well,
some of
it's
them,
trying to be.
there's a group that's come up recently when we asked to people to not use the convention center here. There's a group that came up called the Boycott Group, and the head of that group, the publisher, the Christian publisher.
Gary
His name
DeMar.
is
Gary DeMar. Gary DeMar came in and started this group. The Christian groups here seem to have some loose affiliation, uncomfortable but loose affiliation with older, more established white supremacist groups that are here. The Boycott Group, one of the members ran Pat Buchanan's Georgia campaign when he was running for office. When David Duke pulled out of the presidential campaign, the man made a public statement that David Duke supporters were honor bound to throw their support in for Buchanan, that he was the champion of their cause now. And in Cobb County, you have the White Power Association, J.B. Stoner Group, which is little. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Charged at one time in the infamous bombing of the church in
The church
Alabama, in which 4 little girls were killed.
Yeah, and you have there is an Aryan Nation or something group here. There's a skinhead group that's active in Cobb County.
Have you been in touch with the Center for Democratic Renewal?
I
Noel
Yes.
had been at one time.
In fact, Center for Democratic Renewal was what led us to the data center, which is what led us to your group. And your group, the gentleman I talked to at at the data center said that you would probably be the most helpful and of the names that they gave me. And he was right. National Coalition Against Censorship, National Campaign for Freedom of Expression. There was a third group as well, and your group was the most active that we've contacted, very much the most helpful.
Good. That's good to hear. Particularly since I was on vacation, so I was good to know things work when you're not in the office. Stephen does a great job.
Yeah, he wrote letters. He wrote letters to the newspapers.
I know
they were printed.
We sent a lot of legal analysis to the county attorney to encourage him against allowing the restriction because it would be likely struck down as it was in the case, which, by the way, we co-counsel with the ACLU.
The interesting thing is the county attorney, Fred Bentley, is one of these Christian right types. So the fear of litigation really didn't bother him. He knows that this would be litigated, but that didn't really bother him.
Yeah, very often they know that, and it's just a nuisance that they know that we have to raise the money and we have to spend a lot of time and energy. They'll distract us from other issues, and they don't really care, even if they lose after 3 or 4
They're
years.
already litigating a losing case. They've already lost with regards to the Ten Commandments. There is an old poster, I mean, that's all you can really call it, in the state courthouse of the Ten Commandments, the Christian version of the Ten Commandments, and at the bottom are true sayings attributed to Jesus. And we had a number of complaints over the years. We were able to obtain individuals who wanted to be plaintiffs with regard to that, because we have found that any litigation that we do against a Christian right, and this is something that I find particularly appalling, and it was a lesson I learned very quickly when I came on board at the ACLU 2 years ago, that is the most dangerous litigation that we do. Our death threats, intimidation, the harassing of plaintiffs' children and family, property damage is almost always in those types of cases. Gay and lesbian rights probably takes a second to that.
Well, and reproductive rights.
Yes. Yes, yeah.
For sure, I mean, that's...
But a lot of times the reproductive freedom issues are part of the,
Right.
well, it's more gay and lesbian rights too, to a certain extent, with regards to the Christian right. But we won.
Right.
We have an excellent decision from Judge Hsu in the district court, federal district court. The county was not going to appeal it because they were told by their attorneys that it's a waste to appeal it. We've got umpteen decisions at the Supreme Court level. You've done as much as you can. Now let's cut our losses. And initially, the county commissioners were basically saying, well, we don't like it, but we're not going to do it. They got bombarded by calls orchestrated by the local Christian right. And after getting bombarded by those calls, they've decided to pursue it anyway. So they have no qualms in this county when public pressure peaks to throw tax dollars and time completely out the window. And that's what they've done before, and they're going to do it again here.
And part of the problem is people like our county attorney are members of these groups, so they don't have a problem. I'm sure that they don't have a problem helping to orchestrate the alleged public pressure.
There's a long history here, though, going back to the white supremacist groups and the county government, and now with the Christian groups here. There's a long history of separatism, of wanting to be separate and isolated, keeping people they don't like away, keeping them out of the community.
I spoke to a woman in Washington, actually, who works for the National Cultural Alliance. Said, I heard you're going to be in Cobb County, and I said, yeah. She said, well, I grew up there. I was born and raised there, went to high school there. My parents still live there, and I'm really upset about what's going on, and my parents are very upset. But the analysis she gave me, brief, was she was born here. Was that a lot of the problems have come when people moved in the last few years from other places seeking a certain kind of way of life in this county, and that they're so threatened by change that the elements that they feel that they left somewhere else might start to appear in their new neighborhood. They are very anxious to keep it that way. And that was...
I would tend to dispute that. Leo Frank was lynched in Marietta. There's a long history of Klan activity, and many Klan leaders are here in Cobb County.
He was lynched by the blue bloods, the families that were the pillars of the community, not by a drunk mob.
That's correct.
That's an interesting point.
So it's nothing new for Cobb County. But I don't think,
Does it have a high rate of newer residents?
It's probably, it's typical of transient suburbia. There's a lot of corporate people here and a lot of corporate relocations occur here.
County doubled in size between early 70s and early 80s. Like
Cobb County had the highest growth rate in the country.
For like 3 years in a row. Went from
Huge growth.
largely unpaved roads to 99% paved roads, lots of real estate development. It's a county where there is this group of isolation, several people, maybe other people who moved in that felt similarly, and a county that was just changing rapidly. And so it's probably very threatening to those people.
this also is probably one of the 3 counties in the entire state. We have 159 counties in Georgia with a large Jewish population.
This county?
Very large Jewish population, yes.
Quite a number
And-
of synagogues here,
Yes,
which
and
is unusual in Georgia.
one of the local rabbis was at the hearing, the county commission hearing, in which they cut the arts funding. He was furious, and he was very upset. He was very concerned for the individuals at his temple, with the Christian right and the people that were coming out of the woodwork and threatening violence against gays and lesbians, anyone perceived to be gay or lesbian, or just plain non-Christian. He's very concerned, as every Jewish Cobb County resident I've talked to since this all occurred.
The National Democratic Jewish Council the Jewish community has been a little slow to respond in a lot of instances until it got much closer to the religious right. And finally, the National Jewish Democratic Council has organized a religious right campaign and called, and someone suggested they talk to me. And when I told him about all the other coalitions that had already formed around this, he was very surprised, and now actually had linked up their group to all of our other efforts as well. And he said that they'd had a hard time getting it on the agenda, like the ADL or any other groups, because they're nervous about cross religion battling.
Well, John and others here did an excellent rally right after the resolution passed.
True.
And who showed up on the other side? Klan.
This plan.
A handful of people that showed up were Klan.
Pictures.
Your photographs.
Neighbors Network was there, and they did extensive documenting because they recognized and were able to identify many of those individuals. Neighbors Network basically is a lot like CDL. It's fairly small, grassroots type organization here in the metro area. But they were there in force and taking
And there were
photos.
rumors they had camera people taking pictures of all of us.
That was
It was all on film.
That wasn't a rumor. The man was there. The man, the large man. That's what he does. He
Oh,
travels
yeah,
around
I
and
know.
takes pictures.
Is that right?
You'll probably appear on the next version of the gay agenda when they their tape
We were
version.
pretty innocuous.
Or the
Yeah,
Thunderbolt.
The Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
And what do you?
My name is Michael Rose, and I've lived in Cobb County for about 7 years. And I moved here, being suburbia and all of that, a nice quiet place. And now look what I've gotten myself into. But I've...
Where were you before that?
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
But professionally, I've worked in museums and for the last few years for a private art broker. So I'm coming from that angle too. So.
And did you just took it upon yourself to get involved? I mean, again, like hearing about it and knowing what was going on and trying to find out what was going on or write about it? Or
Yeah, because I had seen John on television. I knew about a rally that was going to be at the park in town and that sort of thing. So that's pretty much what got me started.
A lot of you know each other before this?
No.
No.
None of us.
John and I have
You
met,
know,
of course.
met before.
Yeah.
Things change daytime.
That's right. That's right.
Well, David Marisky and I were reading the newspaper about this horrid resolution that someone was thinking about introducing.
Excuse me, want to stop 1 second, say your name, just so it make it easier when I go through the tape.
Sure. Noel Lytle.
Great.
And we decided that we wanted to do something to fight that. And we started calling around, taking the local gay and lesbian newspaper, the list of organizations in the metropolitan Atlanta area, and calling down through that. And also contacting groups at a national level that we thought might be interested in this. And when it started coming out that there was 2 resolutions that were basically hooked together, one of them was saying, was condemning gays and saying they were against family values and community standards, and the second one saying no county arts funding of any arts groups which produced works that did not meet community standards and family values. It seemed like we doubled our chances of winning by introducing the censorship, the freedom of expression, and we kind of reached out more to groups like your group and the National Coalition Against Censorship and some of these other artistic related groups. And what we tried to do by contacting the local groups was find out if there was anybody in Cobb County that had been active before, what Cobb County groups there were that they might know, and would they contact their Cobb County membership or do a mailing on our behalf that we would pay for to inform them that a group was forming. And there was only 3 names of people that surfaced. One was John Greaves, one was David Greer, John's partner, and one was Lynn Patterson, who couldn't be here tonight. She had a prior commitment. And that was it, and counting almost $500,000. So we basically concentrated on organizations, and John concentrated on things like getting in press releases about meetings. And because he's so excellent at communications, at basically handling any press contacts with the group. He's famous throughout Metro Atlanta.
Maybe notorious.
And we just decided that if we were going to lose, and it looked like when we were forming the group that we were going to lose, that it was a done deal, that we wanted to make it as costly as possible, and that we were going to fight as though it was not lost. And we're still fighting. And I think we are going to get them overturned, but it might not be until a new county commission is seated.
The voting booth is always a great place for action. And are you, what do you do otherwise? Are you involved in the arts community or just?
No, not really. I did have a little bit of involvement in the gay and lesbian community at a national level as a member of HRCF. And David and I had thrown the house party to lift the military ban. We participated in the March on Washington, things like that, but nothing in the arts community, nothing really on a local level.
Was there, so did most of the, I haven't finished everybody, but did most of the response come from people who weren't in the arts community initially here?
That's what I was concentrating on, because it seemed like the arts community, first of all, was better organized, and secondly, they were already doing things. Theater in the Square was directly attacked, and they were contacting their 4,200 member mailing list of season ticket holders. And you had people like Lisa Mount from the arts community that were actively involved. So they looked like they were organizing the arts members and anybody that was supportive of the arts community And it looked like, from my viewpoint, where we needed to concentrate was trying to organize the gay and lesbian opposition to it.
Yeah, I've got things on this afternoon.
My name is Carolyn Phillips, and I went to high school, middle school, and elementary school in Cobb County, and then I went to the University of Georgia, which is in Athens. And so I just moved home recently, like the beginning of the summer, and then, this came upon us. And I'm a student at Kennesaw State College now, transient student there. And I kind of found out about the group through some friends of mine who were also really concerned because they're more closeted or whatever, but they didn't feel like they could speak up. There's an organization called GLUE, which I think David started, didn't he, over there? So anyway, and at Kennesaw there's a lot of concern because they have an art school there, and so there's that tie also, because a lot of the artists there are also gay and lesbian, and but they're not. Just the feel of the campus. I'm coming from as a student. It's there's a lot of tension there. So, and it's very frustrating to see the people, or the people who normally would be able to express themselves or be open. This one guy I was talking to said he feels like his whole life is cramped now. And he's an artist, excellent artist. Matter of fact, they are showing some of his stuff on campus, and he's really struggling. So.
Is this a religious college?
No, it's they just became a senior member or senior.
In 4-year college.
Yes.
Or the state college, state university system.
Public school. Yeah.
But this is the college where Newt Gingrich is teaching his class.
As a matter of
If you've written
fact.
Oh, yes.
So there's and there's a lot of I work over there, and there's a lot of talk. There are professors that have Stop Hate Politics, the flyers and everything all over, and everything all over their doors. And then there are other professors that have all their you're gonna go to hell and blah blah all over their doors. So it's very tense up there.
Polarized.
And
Addressed towards the gay community?
yeah,
Professors have this on
they'll
their...
just have their own views. They have in the copy room. I've found so many different articles. I found articles like Louis Grizard. I call him. Do you know who I'm talking about? He. I saw a bunch of copies of his article just laying all over the place. And there was a newspaper. It's called The News. I've never heard of it before, but somebody was copying it for one of the chairs, and it was all about praising Wysong and praising the whole movement, how arts should be separate and we shouldn't be paying for gays and lesbians to do their artsy thing or whatever. It was just totally incorrect information too. About how Cobb County is now just booming, everybody's moving here, which is not true. It's not true. And I know I'm going on and on, but and being at Kennesaw, I've had to contact the police now 3 times because I have a rainbow sticker on the back of my car. And for one of my reports for my literature class over the summer, I did a report on Oscar Wilde and relating that back to what's going on in Cobb County. And I had my car keyed, and I had people put bottles. Somebody was putting bottles underneath my tires, and Dyke written on my car. And it just, I don't appreciate it. So there's to understand.
Carolyn, how responsive have the police been when you call them?
They said they don't usually document stuff like that, and I know that's not true. I know that is not true. So I talked to
They don't document bias crimes here in Georgia.
Oh, they don't?
No, it's only the
In
city of
Athens they
Atlanta.
do.
We'll see what they...
And Athens might have a special
Yes.
local
Vandalism
ordinance.
is a crime.
Mm-hmm.
So-
It's a crime.
So,
Last I heard,
Did they
keys
go
on
ahead
those
and write
cars.
it up, or
Well, they didn't
Yeah.
until the last thing, which was Dyke. And I just walked up to my car and I saw it, and then I walked back, and I was like, I don't want to deal with this. And of course, I was in tears. It was very embarrassing, but, well, not being in tears, but just so frustrating. So it's very tense around here, and tough to be a student.
Well, was this preceding all of the summer's activities?
No,
It came out of
this was
help?
in the middle
Right.
towards the end. It was probably a week before, before the vote.
So it's
Probably
helped to polarize the
Mhm.
campus.
Which vote, the arts vote or the?
the final thing that's, yes, the arts vote.
The
So it's
preamble.
after the resolution.
After the
condemning
resolution.
gays.
Right.
The preamble to that resolution condemning gays and lesbian says that they wish to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the citizens of Cobb County. And from what we're hearing,
I feel
it's just the opposite. I mean, it is.
Or that
it
citizens
is-
has a very narrow meaning for
Well,
them.
it's us.
Certain citizens.
Yeah, it's
But
people like
still,
us.
when you start talking about the health and safety and you start igniting, not matches, but torches across the county with a resolution such as this, then you've made it okay. You've made it okay to beat people up.
On the, once again, speaking just from my experience as a student or what have you, and even I belong to a church here, and outward, both on campus and outwardly in the church, people just feel nothing about saying, I hate them, blah, 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 I hate gays, da, 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 and just, we need to, and it's made it okay. It's okay now, because you're just subhuman, I guess.
The community has become polarized, so at the same time as there's been more harassment, more attacks, and people aren't embarrassed about talking out publicly about some group that they hate or dislike, there also has been an outpouring of people who are embarrassed at what's happening in the county and are supportive and want us to know there are good people here. So that really the community is very polarized right now.
Yes.
This is what happened in Oregon and Colorado too.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Oregon, and there was that whole series of events that suddenly, because somebody was actually putting a piece of legislation forward, suddenly became okay to be gay bashing more and more.
We want to hear all the reports though. I mean, I've got one that was like third or fourth hand that we haven't been able to substantiate, where a man with a rainbow flag on the back of his car got pulled over by local police in Smyrna. And when they couldn't find anything wrong with what he'd done, and it was a single police officer in the car, rather, they walked around the car, and then while the guy was sitting behind the driver's wheel, he walked up with his flashlight and knocked the light out in the back, the tail light in his car, and then arrested him for having an unsafe car on the road. I have not been able to substantiate that. The source I got it from was a very good source, however, so that's the only reason I'm repeating it. But we did get a call a little over a week ago in which basically I dropped everything and got some legal counsel for this young man, literally a week ago.
So he has come forward.
No, it's a different case entirely, where a gay man who had custody of a child in foster care since his child was 2 years old, the child's now 6 years old, that they made a determination that though he'd always had excellent reviews in his home studies and so in his regular home studies and visits, always had excellent responses, that the supervisor of his casework, or two supervisors up, felt that they would have to determine him to be an unfit parent.
This defects?
Local defects, yes. That they would have to determine him to be an unfit parent because of the fact that he's gay, based upon this resolution, which supposedly has no legal or binding effect. Now, we've got counsel for him who's staying with him. The hearing that he had just this last Monday, or this Monday, they never raised that issue. So right now, it's not really an ACLU issue, but we're staying with it, and we've got some local counsel.
Cobb County courts are not criminal courts. They, has it been 2 or 3 years? Greg Scroggins,
Yes.
who lived here, lived in a house with his partner next door to his parents, and they had a fight one evening, and he had on leather pants and a leather vest or harness, and I guess the fight must have been just pretty strong argument. His partner called the police. Well, they split apart. He went next door to his parents' home. It was 3 or 4 in the morning, knocking on the door. The police came while he was on the front porch of his parents' home and beat him. His parents came outside to find out what was going on. His father tried to stop them. They beat his father's home, and they arrested his father and his mother for interfering with a police officer. And the police, by his side of the story, the police put him into a chokehold, and as he was losing consciousness, bit down trying to get him to let go. And he was HIV positive. State law does not allow them to reveal someone's HIV status without their consent or without a court order. And it was introduced, it was revealed in the hospital. I've forgotten where it
I'm not
happened.
exactly certain.
There were several times where people gave out his HIV status in violation of the law. And he was charged with attempted murder because he made a police officer. Did not break the skin, didn't even go through the leather jacket, or whatever the jacket was he had, I don't know if it was leather. But he was charged with attempted murder and ran through the court in record time. Yeah, he's convicted, he's in state prison.
And I'm not exactly certain what part we played into it, but the ACLU was involved in that case as well. And one of our former board members, Bruce Harvey, is representing a gay man who's been charged with sodomizing a 14-year-old. Guilty or innocent is really not the issue, because Bruce Harvey has requested a change of venue because he strongly feels, and I believe he's right, his client will never get a fair trial in this county, not under these current conditions.
David Mayersky, Noel pretty well summed up, how he became involved in it. I did want to add that I'm on the board of a local choir here, a local community choir. And when we saw this news article in July, we were kind of incensed about that. Me as a member of the arts community, and as members of the community, this kind of thing is coming into our community. We had read over the past year or so that the Christian Coalition had targeted the state as one that would be receptive to their kind of organizing and their kind of legislative activity. So we were kind of aware that something like this might happen. When I read that article, and I called him at work right away, and I told him that, this is our backyard, we can't let this go without saying something. And that's why we got so heavily involved like we did.
What's the choir chorus? What kind of chorus is it? Kind of church related?
It's not church related, it's a community choir. We do typical 4-part arrangement, mostly Renaissance music, some modern music, not a lot.
What do you do otherwise? What kind of work is your work?
I'm a financial analyst otherwise. That's what I do to pay the bills.
How long have you lived in Cobb County?
We've been here for 2 years. Prior to that, we were in North Bolton, which is adjacent to here. It's 20 to 40 minutes away from where we live now. Similar type of community. I work in Cobb County, yes. About 10 minutes away from home.
Well, my name is Rod Smith. I grew up in northwest Georgia, about 60 miles from here. Went through junior high school and high school there. Went off to college and graduate school, and moved back to Atlanta upon completing graduate school. Actually working for the State Baptist Convention. So I'm a licensed Baptist minister. Though not the least bit active in Baptist churches now for various reasons. Over the number of years of being in Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, I've lived in a couple different places, first in Gwinnett County, then in Atlanta, and then moved to Cobb County. But during that course of time, I've become aware that I needed to speak up in different ways in order to protect who I am and for the protection and rights of other gay people. And this past spring, I guess, took my first stance, or at least Michael and I took our first since outward stance, and we went to Washington In this summer, I guess, before the issues came up in Cobb County, I wrote my congressman and senators and the president for the first time since I was a kid. And it specifically addressed gay rights and protection for homosexuals, on a national level. That's what I addressed each of the congressmen, senators, and president. And then when the county commission, came out with the resolution, I said, this does it. And as soon as I heard about the Cobb Citizens Coalition meeting, I said, well, I'm going to get involved and have tried to do that. As such, professionally, after being in the ministry for 3 years here in the city, working with the State Baptist Convention, I left the ministry and just entered the business world, and am a salesman in the auto parts business, actually, and have been working with that for going on about 10 years now.
Here in the county?
No, but the company with which I work is on the south side of town in Clayton County, but as a salesman, I call on people all over the city, so it doesn't really matter where I live, actually.
Does this issue ever overlap in your work?
Oh, absolutely. The industry that I'm in, automotive, I think is perceived as being controlled and operated by relatively backwards, simple-minded people. And I can attest to the fact that that's true. At my office, there are 3 groups of people who are much maligned by jokes. Probably first of all is blacks, then second is gays, and third is women. So, I have to put up with...
Do they know you're gay?
No, I assume not.
But they don't even make any, suggested references?
Yeah,
In an
they
aggressive
do.
way?
Yeah, they do in a somewhat, somewhat harassing. No, I don't. I think there are probably some people who think, this guy's probably gay, but no, not really. So there is...
So they don't write on your card?
No. I'd write back. Well, no, I probably wouldn't, but, it's just, I'm just real tired of, having to put up with stereotyping and ill treatment at work and life in general. I'm just tired of people that, think that because somebody's gay, they can treat them unequally from anybody else. And it goes the same, for blacks or women. I mean, in my work, there's 2 women in my office, and there are 35 employees. And you can just take it so long, and you finally have to say, you're going to do something. Now, I'm not going to the point of, coming out of the office, because I don't think that would necessarily help my cause. But that's a kind of a personal decision.
Has this issue, do they talk about it a lot there? What happened with the
At first, no, the comic strip is the most advanced form of art that people in my office would recognize. They really aren't the least bit concerned about arts, and aren't concerned about arts in Cobb County. That they were able to say that the county commission could condemn gays gave them opportunity to make more negative comments about gays. And they have taken advantage of that opportunity. It's out of the forefront on the agenda of things discussed these days at work. But I kind of bring it back up. Cartoon that appeared in the Creative Local this week showed Newt Gingrich with a whip. I don't know if you may have seen it. Yeah. I passed that around at the office today. I don't know how well it went over.
Did they understand it?
I don't think so.
I'd love,
But I can't wait to see it,
The loaf is free. I don't know exactly where you're staying at, but you can probably pick one at
what's it called?
around the
Creative
corner.
Local.
It's a tabloid.
Loafing?
Right.
Is there anything that, in hindsight, it's not, I mean, the battle's not over, that you might, talking to people from other parts of the country who may be having to go through this, you would have done differently, or things you've learned through all of this that you would really reconsider?
In hindsight, we had talked about that when the Republican National Convention was going on last year, and we had read about and seen some of it on television. We thought, we probably should have some kind of organization locally of people that we can contact if some of this kind of thing drifts our way, because it sounds like it's going to. But, we were in a routine, we had a comfortable life here, so we just never really did that. We thought about it, but we never really did that. And when this came up around here, we thought, that's what we should have done. And at that time, we should have started trying to get to know people and contact a network of people to deal with something like this. When it happened, we didn't know anybody here that we could tap into to help us out.
I've not been a part of the integral operation or the initial operation of the committee, but, from a retrospective point, it would have been advantageous to have been organized beforehand.
At least to have listings of people that you could contact to get some activity going, either simply phone calls to the commissioner's office. I mean, that was real hard to do, just to get people to do that, just to find people that would be willing to do that. If we had some kind of organization in place prior to then, we could have fired it off just like the Christian Coalition does. But we didn't have that. So it took us several weeks before we really got a volume of activity going.
Did you didn't know if you mentioned the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force?
Yes, and in fact, we contacted several people in that organization. The way that they're organized, they have different subgroups. One of their subgroups is Fight the Right, for example, and that's headquartered somewhere in Oregon, I think Portland. And they're on our mailing list. One of the things that we have tried to do is, for any of the groups that have requested it, David has compiled on a weekly basis press clippings. And
we started that immediately. I don't know whose idea it was, but we started doing that immediately.
And the ACLU, for example, wanted to have that for possible legal action. National Campaign for Freedom of Expression had expressed interest in legal action, at least with the arts resolution, as did People for the American Way. And Carol Brown has been basically doing the same thing with TV clippings, if you would, on recording all the television exposure that we've had, which has been very, very considerable. But with Fight the Right, the only thing that we really were able to get from them was this manual that they put together that was a Fight the Right kit. It had some good information in there, but it's basically talking about how to organize if you had time to organize, rather than if you're reacting to events.
We were
like
scurrying,
we were.
we didn't have time to
That's how it
follow
and
next
I have that
steps.
book, and it's good, but it is, I mean, as you just pointed out, that's one of the things that we're trying to get ahead of the game a little bit on, and in fact, why we're doing this, because I think it will help people to hear what's happened here and connect faces with it rather than just the name Cobb County and something that happened. To really begin to think about the possibility it could happen in their community, because I've been trying to talk to people about that for 2.5 years, we have, and if there isn't a problem yet, then people don't want to organize. But, and then when there is a problem, you're in the kind of situation you were talking about, which is, where do I go, who do I call, who else?
And there is a problem, and what's wrong is that a lot of people don't recognize that there is a problem.
No,
And I think
we didn't either.
there's a need. We should look at what and I think groups are starting to do this, what the Christian Coalition is doing with their gay agenda video and their grassroots organizing. We need to put together some very careful educational materials that can be done in a comfortable setting at someone's home, in a house party, in a small group, in a meeting somewhere. And we need to communicate the message through those materials that your rights, your ability to live and be who you are threatened. And if you don't do something to fight that, then we're all going to lose. And we need to convince people of that so that they feel that urgency to go ahead and get organized before it does happen on their back door, so they're ready when it happens in their back door.
That's right. Even if you're comfortable, because we were comfortable here, and our neighbors certainly knew who we were. It's never been a secret, but we were comfortable there. Neighbors were comfortable with us, apparently comfortable with us, so we never felt threatened in any way.
Has that changed?
I don't think so. Doesn't seem to.
People that know us usually.
People, yeah.
Well, the statistics show that that's why.
We don't like those gays and lesbians.
Politicalized,
That's right.
because it helps
We don't-
people put a face on.
We don't like the gays and lesbians, but he's okay. He's okay. We know him.
There's another very strong impression that I have too about whether the right way is to fight this fight. We know that we're dealing with homophobia, but when we call it homophobia, when we do it publicly around people who are not gay and lesbian, it's almost like a fighting word. It's a name that you call somebody. You're a homophobe. When we put labels on people and identify them as bigots, it's almost like a fighting word. And there are people who might support us who react to those as fighting words, and they get on the defensive and they quit listening. I think it's very, very important that we get away from using labels when we talk to the community at large about what's happening and how it affects our communities, and that we begin talking about how it feels and talk about the behaviors. Instead of saying Commissioner Wysong is a bigot and a homophobe, we said Commissioner Wysong, which is true, you know. But instead of saying that, which probably would have alienated a lot of people, and they react to those words as fighting words, and they get defensive, and they don't listen to what you have to say, and they don't identify because if they're not gay, and if they're white middle class, they don't feel very strongly about bigotry. They may not even realize that it exists in our society to any degree. So what we have done, and I think it's been successful to some extent in marshaling public opinion and winning support from non-gay and non-arts community people, is to say that Commissioner Wysong has contemned and attacked a group of citizens. It's wrong to attack any group of citizens. He's made a group of people feel unwelcome and afraid in their own community. We've talked about the behavior and the effects of those behaviors rather than throwing out labels.
What it does rather than just.
Right. We've not used the terms at all.
We avoided
If you
using
look through any of the press coverage that there has been, and you all have gotten all the articles we've sent, you'll see that none of us have used those terms. It's been Commissioner Wysong and other people like that have used those terms. They claim they've been called that. They haven't been called it by us.
He's really seemed as if he wanted us to call him a bigot and a Nazi and a homophobe, and when we didn't, you could see the disappointment
Exactly.
in his face.
He led us on. He led us on by
He's
using
ready
the terms
to deal with
himself.
us as people who are throwing stones
Didn't
at him or
work.
calling names, and we didn't let him do that.
Didn't work.
They've done a very good job. I'm impressed. I mean, when we first got the call for help, when we first heard that this was happening, we started, of course, marshaling our forces and trying to figure out, okay, what do we do to prepare for litigation? You know, as calls started coming in, where do we direct them? What you have done in putting together the Citizens Coalition, I think, is remarkable. I'm very impressed. I've done some grassroots work myself that we had to react to something in a hurry and pull together everything from civil disobedience to major litigation. But it takes time, it takes energy, it takes an incredible amount of money. So I know what it's been like for them, having done this myself, but it's been an excellent experience for us in our office. I know Carol called one day because she had a throwaway newspaper and wanted to know what she could do to help, and I put her in touch with John. David has sent us copies of articles that have been very helpful for us in determining when we are sitting down at meetings with attorneys and conference calling, such as we just had another one today, with attorneys from around the country. And then by their being the eyes and ears throughout the county, so that when things happen, such as what Carolyn has said, or the incidents that I mentioned earlier, when these things happen, they get to us, and we want those to keep coming to us, because one of those issues is going to have the right factual situation
Right.
for us to do something about. 99% will not, but it's worth trying to find out if that 1%, that one call is the right call. And so we are screening everything from Cobb County very carefully, very carefully.
I think Carol needs to get it in front of the
Yeah.
camera.
Yeah.
No, well, what I would like to do, if you don't want to be in front of the camera, you can film me or anything you want, and will you talk while you film whatever you want? So Carol, how did you start doing all this documentation and why? Which of course the documentation is crucial for this kind of thing.
I came home from work early one evening to mow my lawn and picked up the East Cobb Neighbor and saw anti-gay resolution, and I was on the phone to the ACLU the next morning and asked if there was any opposition being organized, and she put me in touch with John.
And where do you live?
I live in Cobb in Wysong's district, close to Noel and David.
Did you know them before?
No, I didn't know any of these people before, and I've never been politically active, or at least not since my early 20s, which is a long time ago. And I had been involved with the arts community in the 80s. I did a lot of volunteer taping for Theatrical Outfit and then Horizon Theater. And I've always enjoyed the symphony and things like that. And so it was sort of a double thing for me. And initially I got involved in the documentation because the ACLU thought that if litigation came up, it would be helpful to have this for transcripts.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I started taping, and that's the only reason. And I think it was, actually I think it was David Greer that suggested that I do some sort of a documentary, and so that's how it, that's how everything evolved.
And is this what you do otherwise?
I'm a small business owner. I duplicate videotape. I do have some experience in industrial and consumer level production and post-production. So it's sort of, yeah, I do have experience in this.
And are you, did you say you were from here? Or you just had lived here for a long time?
Well, I've lived in Atlanta since '64, and I bought my house in Cobb in 1988.
What about personal experiences you've had since all this started in terms of where you live or an atmosphere of polarization? Do you
Well, I've
feel it?
never been particularly close to my neighbors, so that's not a problem. I'm not home very much. I spend most of my time in town, and most of the people I know are very sympathetic to us and what's going on. They're pretty appalled by the whole situation.
And what are you going to do with your documentary? Or where is it at this point?
The particular short tape that I'm working on is nearly completed, and it is going to go as part of a mail-out along with a brochure and a cover letter to the companies that are planning to be booked into the Galleria.
Right.
And also we'll probably send it out as an educational tape and to friendly groups that are interested in what happened.
Great. Yeah,
That gives you a good, it gives you a good overview of where it started.
that brings up the
Nastiness
boycott.
involved.
The boycott. Everyone asks about the boycott, and when Colorado happened, I started getting calls from organizations like Chamber of Music of America saying, we're supposed to have our annual meeting there, we're thinking maybe we shouldn't, what's your advice, what should we do? Individuals calling. And now I'm getting it about Cobb County, that is that a good idea, is it a bad idea? So whoever, talk about what you think and what the ideas of the boycott are.
They can address the boycott, but I just wanted to tell them what happened the very day that the arts funding resolution had passed ordinance. But when I got home that night, one of my neighbors had been planning this huge group to go to Six Flags. And so all of us were going to stay like kids.
Tell me what Six Flags
It's
is.
some sort of amusement park. I guess that's the best way to describe it. So she was organizing this huge group. She's an engineer, very married, often goes by Mrs. So I went down to tell her about someone else who was interested in joining us, if it was all right, before I gave her the final okay. She said, she just looked at me, she's furious. At first I thought I'd said or done something wrong. She said, we're not going. I said, we're not? It's in Cobb County. Well, see, all along I had thought it was in a different county, and I said to her, no. She said, yes. And we had discussed with some auto dealers on Cobb Parkway about a couple cars we were very interested in buying. We're not doing it. We're buying our cars elsewhere. I've never been so angry as when I watched the Cobb County Commission on the news earlier this evening.
And where does she live?
She lives in Grant Park. She lives in
Is that in
Atlanta.
Cobb County?
No,
It's in Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta.
City of Atlanta, Fulton County.
So Six Flags is in Cobb County?
Yes,
Yes.
and a number of individuals have come up to me that may have done, we just had our neighborhood festival, a major party this past weekend. People will come up and go, thanks, you know, we really appreciate your standing up on this, that we're really upset about Cobb County. And time and time again, even if you're not orchestrating the boycott, they're out there telling me over and over again, my dollars are going elsewhere.
And we're hearing that too on our voicemail. We're getting a lot of calls from people saying that you're not spending any more money here. They don't live here, and they generally would have spent money here. We've got nice malls and things like that to spend money at. And they're saying that they're not doing that anymore, just as a show of support. We've never officially called for that kind of thing.
So there has been no official effort?
Not to boycott businesses in the county.
Not
very
not a
focused.
general business boycott. There is an effort underway to prevent businesses from meeting in the new county convention facility. And if they have meetings or conventions already planned, to get them to cancel out. So far, 3 have done so.
Oh, really?
Or if not cancel, at least make a statement saying that, you know, we put money up for this, we're not going to cancel, but we don't like what's going on.
I think one
We'd like
canceled
to see
and
that.
2 stopped negotiations, isn't it?
You know which they were?
Georgia Society of Association Executives, which is hospitality industry, was going to have a free meeting at the convention center. The convention center wanted them very badly, wanted them to have their meeting there because it was a chance to showcase their new facility to people who plan meetings in the state. We focused on the Cobb Gallery and Convention Center. It's a new facility. It's not open yet. It's being built with $42 million of
Tax
tax dollars. It's going to be a county-operated, county-owned and operated facility. The polls that were done, one on August 24th in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and another one was done on the Marietta Daily Journal. I
It
don't
was
know
done
the
later
date.
than the headline.
Later than that. When you look at those polls, while people may not be supportive of gay and lesbian rights, or the people in the community, majority did not support what the county commissioners did. I think the Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll showed about 33% of the people in Cobb County did not support what the commissioners did. We didn't want to take an action that would attack the whole community. The whole community was supporting us, most of the community, or at least was not supporting our being attacked. The convention facility was a way to ask businesses and organizations to voice their being upset with the county commission's action, and give them a target to focus that being upset on, a target that was tied to county funding and to the county commission. We have asked that if they can't, if groups that could not move their meetings for logistical reasons, that they make a strong public statement for acceptance and inclusion of all people, a statement against intolerance. We've asked for businesses that are doing business here now or considering moving here to understand that there's an air of hostility and intolerance and in this community, and that they should be aware of that in making decisions about doing business here. If they are going to do business here or elsewhere, that they need to have an EEOC or EEO statement that includes sexual orientation, so that their employees don't fear for losing their jobs, and make statements about that.
Has there been a counter thing, like trying to get Christian Coalition to come and have a convention here to show you that they can It's an appealing place to come.
No, but there has been an attempt by a handful of individuals to organize what they call a boycott. Spend your money here, this is a great place to live. They tried to get heavy media coverage and they didn't. So it's what looks like an act of desperation. They bought a approximately $2,000 ad in the Marietta Daily Journal last week, and it covers the whole page, putting forth their opinion of Cobb County and how what the commissioners did by condemning homosexuality was correct, and that you should spend your dollars here to show them that. It basically states that in Colorado, when the Amendment 2 was passed, that tourism went up. And the reason why it went up was because of Amendment 2, and that this same reverse type effect will happen in Cobb County too.
But that's not what happened.
And it quotes a Georgia code, and it gives the numbers for the code, the state law, and said, according to this law, and then quotes, homosexuals have no legal right to sodomy.
That's right.
Which is,
What about heterosexuals?
well, there's not a Georgia law that says homosexuals have no legal right to sodomy.
It basically says that there's no sodomy.
One of the members of the Boycott Group is Bob Barr, who ran as a Republican in the primaries for the same Senate seat that Paul Coverdale won. And Bob Barr previously was the U.S. Attorney for this district.
Big media hound. All talk and little or no action.
Yeah, and he seems to link himself up with extremist type.
He stood there in that press conference with Gary DeMar and with
Yeah.
one of the white supremacists who was a part of that group.
And I think that was part of the reason why he.
Pat
that was
Well, his
part of the
wife
reason
is
why
on
he
the
go for
council
it.
that you're on, and she was the only member to vote against the,
In the community relations.
you're right, yeah.
She switched though, didn't she?
The Community Relations Council passed I tried to get them to do something prior to the commissioners voting on the resolution or the arts ordinance, and I'd been looking at the issue for a couple, 3 weeks. When they came to the Community Relations Council meeting, some of it was the first time that they saw the issue, and then they said, well, we need to think about this more and come back. Well, they did come back after the commissioners had passed the resolution, and the day before they cut all arts funding altogether. And then what the Community Relations Council did was to pass a statement and send a letter to the county commissioners saying that their actions had been ill-advised and inappropriate, that the council supported families, but it wasn't necessary to condemn anyone in order to support families and support community values, and that they should rescind the anti-gay resolution that the county commission had passed. Bob Barr's wife is on the council, and she was the only dissenting vote. It was like 15-1 vote.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, the last meeting I was at, she spoke out unprompted and said that we needed to get rid of this resolution that was bad to the community.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
They need
Very
donors.
interesting.
Well,
They need donors.
and I don't know if she's genuine or if there's an effort to see what the other people on the council, what they would say, to find out who friends are. You know, I don't trust her really.
One of the things that's been interesting about this is, other than the gay and lesbian community and some of the arts community, it's been hard to rally opposition against this. I don't know if it's just the stigmatism of being attached as a gay and lesbian issue or what. But one of our strategies was to try and contact the business community. We really didn't have enough time to do it, but we did fax the Chamber of Commerce a letter in Cobb County saying, if this resolution passes, it's got a lot of business implications. It's going to impact potentially tourism, convention business. Some individuals will no longer spend their money in Cobb County. You better consider this and think about getting involved and stopping this resolution. And we didn't really hear too much from them. Right now, we're hearing the most that we've heard from them. The Chamber of Commerce director, chairman of the board of directors, called and scheduled a meeting between John Greaves and myself, basically to talk about what could they do to get the boycott of the convention center lifted. And in the meeting, he mentioned that apartment vacancies are up, that the number of bank accounts closed is up, sales tax collections are down over a year ago, tourism count of people in the core business district, the square in Marietta, is down. All these implications, and that he laid out, that they had measured. And we're getting calls from the business community after the damage is done. They weren't willing to make the phone calls and such beforehand, and now that they're hurt, they're starting to make phone calls.
And like you said before, they were just, most of those type of people were hoping this would just go away.
Mhm.
They didn't want to hear it, they didn't really want to get involved in it. 'Cause
Deny,
they didn't want their
deny,
name-
deny.
They didn't want their name attached to it.
And a lot of the community now says, well, the damage has been done, and we got this horrible press, and the community's been all upset, and a lot of people don't feel comfortable here anymore, but now maybe it will just all die down and go away. And then that's going to be difficult, I think, for us to work with.
Who are the big employers here? Are the big corporate, big?
Lockheed.
Lockheed, yeah.
Make fighter jets for
Yes.
the Air Force and the Navy.
The Journal-Constitution did an excellent article that I must say, I sat down and read it as soon as I saw it
Yeah.
on that Sunday morning. The coffee wasn't even brewed when I sat down and read that article, but I needed
Wow, when
coffee.
you saw that.
About the first couple paragraphs into, discussing the fact that Cobb County, when they rank counties on basis of amount of federal dollars pumped into a local county, Cobb County in the United States ranks number 3. Number 3. Behind, of course, a suburb of Washington, D.C., in Virginia. What was the second one? Seattle, I think. It was.
One of them was a
Yeah.
port city.
So that was the second one, and Cobb County was number 3. So the feds are pumping incredible amounts of money into this county, while we've all got Newt Gingrich talking to us about how we've got to cut back on our spending, and yet at the same time, as long as his district gets the bread and butter, then he doesn't care what happens to the rest of the country. First off. Second off, I listened to those county commissioners when I was at a county commission meeting on these issues, stand up and say, well, we have the lowest property taxes of any metro county. You don't need to have high property taxes. You're getting money and grants and a buku services from the feds. So I, a citizen of Fulton County in Atlanta, I'm helping pick up the tab for Cobb County, so property owners in Cobb County can pay less.
And if you have
And
a
then to
occasion to
trash.
talk to Barney Frank, who chairs the House Finance Committee, please let him know that.
It would be interesting to know if there is any tie between the presence of Lockheed and the issues that were brought forth and passed. But of course, with Georgia having Sam Nunn, as the senator, and let's face it, from the beginning with the gay issues in the military, it's pretty clear that he was opposed to allowing gays to serve open in the military. That kind of
job as Secretary of Defense.
See,
It lost him the job of Secretary of Defense,
Yeah.
that position.
well, for him to be such an obvious Georgian to come out and basically be negative towards gays, no doubt encourage Wysong and others to say, well, if Sam Nunn can do it,
Sure.
we can too.
And in his presentation, he did use that. He used Sam Nunn as an example of the right thing to do.
All politicians in Georgia love to cozy up to saying that.
He has a 90% approval rate in the most recent survey. 90%. That's a very frightening
He's
statistic.
done it the president, so he's got a lot of power. What about
We'll
churches?
do what we can.
Have you owe it to us?
You. Feudalism.
Have
Well,
you-
Helms isn't from here.
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Have you, church-wise, you belong to churches or thought of, churches, of course, some of them are part of the problem, but we're in one now in church. Have you had any success or with going to talk to groups?
There's been,
This one contacted us.
she was interested in offering her facility if we ever needed it. And that was early on when things first started happening. She left a message on our answering machine. This is the only time I've taken her up on the offer. But she's been very friendly, and she's made calls throughout this whole issue, just checking up on us.
You mentioned the synagogue.
There's been at least one person, from the group speak to the church.
United Church of Christ Church, that's in Commissioner Wysong's district, and contacted us also. Said we're very upset about what happened and what can we do to help. I think that there is a lot of the church community, aside from the Southern Baptists, who probably are upset with what's happened, but also reluctant to say a lot about it because they do live in a conservative community, and taking a stand may mean that they would have a fight inside their congregation. They may lose membership and donations. The article, the Christian Index article, mentions that the Nelson Price of this Roswell Street Baptist Church, prior to the resolution being introduced, sent a letter out to 240, I think it says, rabbis, priests, and ministers, asking them to support this resolution. And he's quoted as saying that he was disappointed, I think, how few of them responded to his letter. But I don't think a lot of the churches really support an attack or negative treatment by the government toward a group of people, but they also don't stand up and speak out against it. And we haven't had too much inroad there.
We really haven't had much of an effort thus far to identify friendly churches or friendly religious leaders. We are in the process of starting one up, and I've heard rumors that there have been congregations that have basically sent a letter to the County Board of Commissioners saying, this isn't right, our church does not support what you're doing. But we just, we haven't had the time or resources to go out and identify.
And they don't copy us.
And they don't copy us.
This one had done that as well. In fact, when the minister told me that one of their parishioners wrote a letter to the newspaper that it was published, and they got a whole handful of threatening phone calls the day afterwards. And although he feels strongly about what he wrote, he's not sure he would do it again, given what happened to him. The minister on the Community Relations Council, he's a member of a group called Martin Luther King Support Group, is an older gentleman. He used to be the head of the Community Relations Council when it started in Cobb County. His name is Randolph Scott. When he was quoted in the paper as saying that the Executive Council of the Community Relations Council, Executive Committee, was going to recommend that the whole body speak out and send this letter to the county commissioners saying that what they did was wrong. He told me later that he received some letters and phone calls, and he was getting letters saying you're a queer and a faggot lover and a communist, and the usual.
Pretty well wraps it up.
And he's gosh, I guess he must be 60, 61 years old. A black minister who was not comfortable with me when we first met in the Community Relations Council, was not comfortable dealing with gay and lesbian issues, and now is quite supportive and I think better understands what we deal with.
The Christian right, though, has recognized the fact that they have a very weak link, particularly here in the South, with African Americans, and are trying to reach out to African American, basically very fundamentalist African American churches within the community, and they formed an organization. We got some of their literature sort of accidentally slipped to us through, it was fortunately given to an activist who copied it, made certain, Larry's got a copy of it, I got a copy of it, and unfortunately I can't find it right now. But I will relocate it, but I believe they call themselves Jacob's Ladder, which I think is probably correct, that would make sense. They are a local group, and they are made up of particular leaders within the Christian right, whites, and also some of the Christian rights who are black. and they're trying to form some sort of coalition to attack particularly gays and lesbians. This is based in Atlanta, however, believe it or not, the Mecca of the South, right? Or the oasis in the South, is that what we're called? The city too busy to hate is now going to, as individuals, of course, we always have, but we now have a formal group that's just formed to target gays and lesbians. It also has encouraged individuals to run for local races. And in Atlanta, we have our school board race, city council, and mayor's race this year. We have so far, particularly through GayPAC and their good work, identified 9 fundamentalists that are running for Atlanta seats. That's about as frightening to us in Atlanta as the Catholics and Christian right taking over the school board in New York City. The parallels are very strong. So we intend to identify them publicly.
And
quickly.
people in Atlanta, 2 months ago, even politically, astute people wrote the Christian right off and said they might do this in the suburbs, but they wouldn't dare try it in Atlanta because they can't win, and they're doing it.
Well, the best glue to bringing the Christian right together with the African-American fundamentalists is the gay and lesbian issue.
That's right.
It's if you talk, I'm sure you have, to African-Americans who are gay and lesbian also, they have the same problem in their communities.
Problem is uniting those communities here is going to be tougher than it is in New York City.
Well, it was an African-American minister in that group that was in their minutes or whatever it was that we got. It's what it looks really like, isn't it?
Yeah, we're seeing that happen in a lot of places now. And it's happening in New York too with the Hispanic conservative Catholics also joining up with the Christian right.
There was a comment by this African-American minister that Martin Luther King did not die so that men could sleep together. And so a copy of those minutes has been taken to Coretta Scott King. So she should have gotten that today.
I recommend a very good article that was, and I'll send a copy if you haven't seen it, called Backlash, written by Henry Louis Gates for New Yorker Magazine a few months ago, talking about why the Black civil rights movement should be involved with the gay and lesbian civil rights movement. It's getting late, and I'd love to have one last sort of, and not like all the way around, but whoever has something to say, about anything you want to say, but thinking in terms of advice to people who are in other communities, or again, things you've learned that you would do differently, would have done differently, just even quick thoughts or ideas.
I don't think any of us would have done anything differently other than have put together some network of names and faces together, just to know people in the community to be able to call upon us.
And I've made efforts to do that for 2 or 3 years on
And
and
it
off.
doesn't always work.
And there hasn't been an interest. You know, we've had meetings and been trying to form groups, and 5 people would come. So.
But something definitely needs to be done in advance.
And maybe we should have, instead of being discouraged when we only got 5 people, maybe we should have started a group with 5 people. That maybe was the mistake.
Well, one of the things that I'd like to say, especially since this is going to be seen by people outside of Georgia, okay, first off, I don't want to write out the entire state, but there is a very large progressive community throughout, in pockets all over Georgia, as well as in some of the most conservative communities. But also the fact that it's truly significant for people to belong to the national organizations that are fighting these efforts, whether it's the National Gay and Lesbian Rights Task Force, your organization, of course, our organization, the ACLU, or just a number of different groups, because it's very important that you keep up your membership, not only to help those groups locally when these fires erupt, but also nationally so that we can get the information we needed in a central location or get the backup support we need. Marjorie Hines, of course, has been on the phone constantly, People for the American Way, between all of the groups.
Right.
We've relied on everybody for help.
And we all work together very closely at the national level. I'm on the phone with Marjorie all the time, with people before. So we've been trying more and more to find ways to get the people in communities from our various connections related to us to work together as well at the local level.
I would say also that something that I have noticed that's been extremely, I think about it often, is the whole focus of this group is different than any group that I've really been with before, because it's positive. Just like the first time I ever met Noel was in the park when he went to thank the police officers for helping us. And even though, 3 of them said, no problem, whatever, and 2, were like, leave me alone, he was still like, well, it's okay, because it's okay. And I thought that was great, because most of the groups that I have been associated with were very young, angry, gay, lesbian, bisexual people. And I'll tell you what, if we had been in charge of this, we would have been written out a long time ago. And so to go slowly and have so much thought put into it, it's okay to take a little bit of time and think about it, and also to talk, with people who have been involved before. So.
That was one thing that came up a couple of times today in the conversation, is like what you all thought and what I thought of, and the ACT UP approach to dealing with these issues and what role it can play or shouldn't play or whatever in a situation like this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I've been referring to it as image crafting. We've been very careful at image crafting, and there's a part of me that doesn't like doing that. But then there's another part of me that says that the ACT UP and Queer Nation are very visible parts of the gay and lesbian community, and they represent a teeny little piece of the gay and lesbian community. We're really a cross-section of America. Every kind of person and in every kind of place, there are gay and lesbian people like that. And when people are misinformed about us and told that they should fear us, and we look different from the way they do, and we act angry, they get scared and they don't listen to what we have to say, and they don't identify with us. It's very, very important that we look for what we have in common with other people and let them see what they have in common with us, so that they have a reason to identify with our struggle, and they have a reason to believe that they should be interested in it, because we look a lot like them and we sound a lot like them. So we've worked at that, and we had some struggle, some fight with the Atlanta ACT UP and the Atlanta, the Lesbian Avengers, and a group called Dykes and Faggots Bash Back, about their concerns that we were too conservative and that we were excluding some gay people, in our efforts to say, look, we want to not come out here and scream in people's faces just to prove that we can do it, because we won't accomplish anything other than showing that we're angry. And we want to go beyond showing that we're angry. We want to get acknowledgement from people that we have a right to live our lives in peace and to be left alone and be respected by our government.
Well, one thing I would like to say is that while I think the approach that they've taken in Cobb County has been very effective, in other communities, groups such as Lesbian Avengers and ACT UP and others have been also very effective. I mean, you wouldn't, City of Atlanta, you would just be totally ignored if it was a very quiet, neighborly sort of, he's my neighbor sort of thing. It would just totally be ignored. But they also have a touch of humor that I think is in the City of Atlanta is vital. So, but it wouldn't work in Cobb.
They did join us and come out to Cobb, the Atlanta ACT UP and the Atlanta Lesbian Avengers, and they said, this is your community where we may not agree with what you're doing, but we're going to respect that.
And they showed their support in that way.
Yes.
And, we tried to impress upon them that frightening the wider populace is not going to get them anywhere. It's not going to get us anywhere here. That's what we tried to let them know.
There's one other thing that I think has been important. I had a pager, and this has been a nuisance here while we've been here this evening, and I work for a cellular telephone company, and so I've had a cellular phone in the car and a phone at the office, and the ability to talk on the phone at the office while I work. I can do credit reports and still talk on the phone, and the phone at home. And when this started, we had the county commission talking about gays and lesbians and the gay lifestyle. We had people talking, Christian right people talking about gays and lesbians and the gay lifestyle and the arts. And there were people talking about us and giving misinformation. And in order to fight that misinformation, we had to be able to get our voice out. And I made it known to as many press people as I could very quickly what my pager number was. And I've taken advantage of what I know of the way people in the media work. They have deadlines. They think of a story, they get assigned it at 11 o'clock in the morning, and they're going to have it written by 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So I really sort of gave up a part of my life, and my coworker's been very kind. They've taken up some slack for me at work, and I use this pager and cellular telephone. When somebody contacted me, I made a point of contacting them back quickly and giving them time when they wanted it. And a lot of times, our side of the story got out, and the commissioner didn't get into a story on the television, or didn't get into one in the newspaper because he was in a meeting, wasn't available before their deadline.
Because they didn't return a phone call that day. You have to realize when they call you that day, you got to respond to that.
To take advantage of the media to get your side of the story out, you have to have a person or persons who the media knows to contact. They have to have a way to get in touch with them anytime, any place, and they have to be able to respond quickly and meet the needs of the journalist doing their job.
And that's been very effective because John basically has been very accessible. He's made himself accessible. The pager's made himself accessible. The message he's conveying, the image he's conveying is that of a very positive, outreach, non-threatening, non-frightening sort of image. And that really is what's needed here in Cobb County, and I think it's one of the reasons why we've gone from a group that basically had 5 people involved in the middle of July to where we've got 150 residents on our mailing list, and where our meetings have 40 to 60 people there.
How often do you meet?
Well, the board, which is open to the membership, meets every 2 weeks, and we basically have about 40 people attending that. The general membership meeting has been about once a month, and the last time we had that, we outgrew our facility and had to turn people away. And we fit in about 65, I think it was, at the restaurant, and literally they brought in so many tables that the spaces between the chairs were like this. I do not know how they managed to service them. I just don't know.
And I say, often when I go out and sometimes into a community, they want to get something started, and only 3 or 4 people will be in the room, and they apologize to me and said, I'm really sorry, more people didn't come. And I have learned, and I say quite sincerely, I don't care, because if the 4 of you or the 3 of you, whoever happen to show up, care enough to really make something happen when you leave here, that's the start of something that we didn't have before I came to talk to you all. And sometimes you can talk to 50 people, and because there are so many people there, it's easy to think, well, somebody else is going to actually go do something about this. I don't, and nobody does anything. So I've become in my own verbally that numbers are great on one hand, but if you start with a small group and those people are going to do something, that is, you're way ahead of the game from where you were, a week ago.
One other thing that the national groups could do, Noel and David mentioned contacting the national groups and asking if they would do a mailing to the people in our zip codes, our area. And there was a lot of time in getting it. The HRCF responded very quickly.
Yes.
Some of the other groups, we'll meet and talk about it at our next board meeting and see if it's okay. That may be the only database we have of friendly people in a lot of communities, and if the national groups that are in coalition together would come up with a plan where they had a quick response, a way of accessing their databases, making a quick decision to access that database, and getting a mailing out, maybe in 2-3 days notice in crisis situations. That may be something that would be very helpful.
It does vary from group to group, and we can respond, and depending on staff resource, get a set of labels out. Other organizations have these complicated layers of how to decide whether they're going to do it or not, but I think it's something I'll bring up at the free expression.
Needs to be worked on.
The booksellers are one, and the library people can do that for you. I will get, if you don't have already, a library mailing list for this area from the ALA.
We don't have one of those. Your Free Expression Network generated us some very positive I hate to say publicity because that implies the wrong thing, but news coverage. Because one of the groups that was on the fax network that was contacted was the Penn Group, poets, playwrights, essayists, and novelists.
Right.
And they did two things, both of which got into the press. One was they got the author of In Butterfly, one of the plays that generated the controversy, to write an opinion piece that the Marietta Daily Journal published in their Sunday newspaper on the front page.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been done in my
You've got it in
opinion.
your news clippings.
Yeah, it's in your
Jerry,
newspaper.
And the second thing was they got a letter from some of their membership, which is incredibly rich and Pulitzer Prize winning.
Values.
And they sent that as a letter to the editor, to both of the newspapers, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote a news article saying, here are 7 Pulitzer Prize winning authors and novelists writing in condemning this resolution. And of course, they ran the letter to the editor as well.
Well, see, that is a great value. And sort of thinking down the line, when this group first came together in New York, it was October of '91 at the Andy Warhol Foundation, in Andy's old studio, and around a big table, it was a bunch of people who had not, the reason I called them together was because we were all kind of working on similar issues, but nobody was working together, nobody really knew each other, and it seemed maybe that we should be talking to each other. And so we sat around this table, and everybody was a little wary, each got your own organization, territory, everyone has to try to fundraise, you've all got different boards. The ABA, or the Recording Industry Association, it represents business groups. They're business people, booksellers. We're a huge recording industry, like Warner Brothers is part of the Recording Industry Association. And over here you have GLAAD that sometimes was attacking the entertainment industry. So everyone sat at a kind of wary table to, well, should we really all be sitting here together? And it's taken a period of time and trust that's built around that table. But now things like this can happen, that network is used, and we all know each other so that they know if we send something out through the network, they feel okay about responding to it. If they don't, it's primarily because they're swamped with something else. But we pulled together a letter. So Wednesday afternoon, I drafted the letter in support of Jane Alexander to be the head of the NEA after her confirmation hearing, and I wouldn't do it until after I heard her testify, because I really believed that I wanted to hear what she had to say before I decided that we wanted to support her. So I drafted it, faxed it overnight to the list, and by the next day I was able to send a letter to the president with a list of the American Library Association, the Recording Industry Association, the National Gay Lesbian Task Force, on and on. And that's a great value to have, for us to have built up a level of working relationship with those groups, where they would just get the letter and feel trustworthy enough to sign on within 24 hours. That's a very valuable thing, and it just takes that kind of time that you build in your community the way that is our community. And it's made a difference. It's made a big difference. So we're not where we were 2.5 years ago, where something like this happens and we're going, what are we going to do? They're attacking the NEA, and now I can get the head of the American Library Association, which is seen as 140,000 libraries in every community coming forward, and they're very, very good on gay and lesbian issues. They have a very strong policy.
And they're under attack.
And they're under attack.
In Hall County, just above.
Is that right?
Just above Cobb County.
Is it Heather has 2 lines?
Heather has 2 lines. And so I sent up, we have a very strong member up there who used to be a member of the state legislature. I sent him a huge packet on book banning and what that really means. And we're going out next week and speak to a number of different organizations.
Well, Banned Books Week is
Next week.
That's right.
Next
There's
week.
lots of material. And see, all the local bookstores, too. I'll get the American Booksellers Association, their local list, because the bookstores are constantly getting material from ABA, their parent organization, and the Foundation for Free Expression about these issues. And so if you call a bookstore owner, they probably got a file drawer full of stuff on this issue from their association, their trade association. So it's not new to them. And you'd be surprised how quickly you could probably get their support, because they're going to get it like that, because they've been reading about it, participating in these events at their annual convention every year. There's a huge free expression event that talks about, among other things, the gay and lesbian problems that have been raised there. Anything else?
Not for me.
Except thank you
I'm being summoned home, so.
very much.
Gee, I don't know why.
Now, one thing I want is you write your name once, spelling and all that, and address. And let me give you my
Thanks right now.